We do all kinds of things here at Word in Your Ear.
We do podcasts.
We do video casts.
Quizzes.
Crowdcasts with famous authors.
And we can guarantee to make your next birthday one you will never forget.
There's only one way to make sure you get all of this, you get it in full, and you get it first.
And that's by becoming a supporter on Patreon.
Details here.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Well, welcome to another Word in Your Attic. And there's somebody who needs no introduction. Bob Harris.
Very good.
I was going to actually say Sir Bob. And then I thought to myself, is he a knight? Yeah. Are you? You're not a knight, are you,
And if
Bob?
not, why not?
Oh, yeah, no, why not?
Yeah.
I love this though, because this is the band back together.
Yeah,
It is.
That's how I think about this.
It's the old line. I know. Bob, I have to say you've won, I think, our Word in Your Attic prize for best shed. Actually, shed is not dignifying it enough. It's a studio, isn't it? You're in the garden of your place up near Oxford. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, this is the Under the Apple Tree
Yeah.
studio, Mark. This is where we do all our sessions and where I do all the recording for my programs. I mean, I'm sitting at my mixing desk, so I can just scroll the microphone over, and suddenly I can be on the radio.
You can be
literally.
live to everybody.
Yeah.
Can you twist your camera so we get a little look at the scale of the operation?
Absolutely. I'm just wondering how untidy it all is, but
No,
yes. So I'll
worry
show
about
you
that.
over my shoulder.
Oh,
my
look at
Lord, that's
that.
amazing.
That's where we do all the sessions. I mean, obviously not this last few months through COVID, but my son Miles curates all the Under the Apple Tree sessions, and that's where they take place. And we've had, believe it or not, like 8 and 7 piece bands in there.
Yeah.
Sort of squashed in, because the studio is very long and narrow, as I'm sure you can now get the sense of.
Yeah.
So, but here's where I'm sitting.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So we've got the mixing desk here. I got this is all Miles's equipment. I don't know what half of it does, to be absolutely honest. But then I've got my vinyl down here.
Oh, let's see. This is amazing. So those are mostly CDs we can see. There's the vinyl.
Those are records.
It's
wonderful.
Oh,
we've lost you. You're back.
Mostly CDs here, but and then some of the other vinyl. See if some of my singles are here.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of them in the garage. And this is my
copy
own
of a David Hepworth book there, I noticed. That's very impressive. 1971.
Yes,
and also a very fun collection of model buses.
Yes. I've been collecting those since I was a child. In fact, you know that wonderful program, The Repair Shop?
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
I want them to repair one of my buses. And it's this one.
Gorgeous.
Because
what's wrong with it?
This is a Triang bus, and it's it comes from my childhood. I was about 5 when I got this bus, and it's now it doesn't really work anymore. It's got a motor in it, but can you see it? Have I got it?
Yeah. So you should be able to let it go, and it goes roaring off on
That's right.
2 back wheels. Yeah.
But it doesn't, and it all round looks a little bit rusty and sad. And I would love them to renovate it, because I love The Repair Shop.
I've watched that a few times. It's fantastic. It's that moment when people come to get the stuff back and they almost always dissolve into tears.
Yes.
Memories of the dear old dad in the Second World War or whatever, you know. It's really
I love
moving.
it. I absolutely love it.
Perfect lockdown entertainment.
Yes.
Very comforting.
So hopefully at some stage or another they might let my bus in.
Yes.
I would love them to renovate this bus for me. We'll see anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good.
But you keep stuff, don't you, Bob? It's fair to say. You hang on to stuff.
Yes, I mean, I'm not a hoarder with a capital H, but I do like keeping things that mean something, you know, that pinpoint a moment in my life or experiences that I've had or whatever it is. So yes. So in the studio, I've got one or two really, really lovely things. Actually, I've got let me carry you with me. Let's see if I can find. It was something I was looking for the other day, and I've got more buses up here as well. Look, so this is a modestly small item, but it carries with it huge vibes. It's the vibe of this that I love so much. There was in the early 90s, I was a big supporter of a blues guitar player called Michael Caton. I used to play him all the time on my overnight shows on Radio 1. And I sort of opened the door up for him to come over here and play a little bit. And he called himself the guitarist from hell because his hometown was Hell, Michigan.
Oh, really?
Oh, brilliant, brilliant.
So he was a really good friend of people like Walter Trout and some of the old blues guys. And he did a gig in the early 80s with Muddy Waters, around the time that Muddy made that fabulous record, actually, with Johnny Winter.
Oh, he made a few, didn't he? Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And he said he and Muddy Waters got quite drunk one night over a couple of bottles of champagne. And he kept the champagne bottle corks because, I shared this bottle with Muddy Waters.
Right.
And as a token of his appreciation of me playing him so much on the radio, he bought me one of the
corks?
Champagne corks. So this cork has been handled by Muddy Waters.
Oh, there you go.
That's fantastic.
There you go.
And it's just a vibe in the studio. I just think it adds somehow.
Right.
It does. So do you occasionally put on his records and then bring out the cork to get the powerful, supernatural connection, vibrating?
There was a lovely picture of Muddy Waters in the paper the other day with Chris Barber. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Did you see that picture with and Ottilie Patterson? I think it was there as well in this picture back from 1961 or something like that. In England. You must have met Chris Barber over the years, did you?
Many times, and it's impossible to overstate how important he was.
I totally agree. Those gaps in his set, which Lonnie Donegan's band played, which kind of invented skiffle, wasn't it? The breaks they used to have during their jazz sets.
Yeah. Well, I've had a couple of long conversations about all of this with Billy Bragg, because both of us maintain that arguably, everybody's got their thoughts about these things, but I would sit down in front of anybody and make a strong case for the fact that Rock Island Line by Lonnie Donegan is the single most important British single ever released, because it was the wellspring for so much that followed. And of course, Lonnie was in Chris's band, and Rock Island Line was recorded in a lunch break between Chris's own band sessions. And it was done in like 15 minutes. It was
Chris Barber on string bass, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But
what was key to it was the fact that it was the kind of music, new music. It was a link to something that stirred something in the people that heard it, in so much as, it was a link to blues. It was a link to Leadbelly. It was a link to the southern, the southern sound of America. And that's a sound that we'd hardly been exposed to at all. But when a British artist did it and put it out on the Decca label, and it made the charts, suddenly there was this link that fired people like John Lennon to go, whoa, what is this? On the one hand, and B, actually, we can reproduce this sound.
We can do this. Because also one of the factors is they had the technology to make that sound, that acoustic guitar and a bass, whatever. Electric guitars, you couldn't get them, could you, in this country in those days? You certainly couldn't get the proper American ones. You could get cheap German or Swedish copies, I think. But it was incredibly difficult to make that sound in Britain in the 1950s.
Yes, it was.
But
and
the
skiffle
guitars, sound.
Yeah, those guitars looked so amazing. But when you've got no budget, when you're John Lennon living in as a 15-year-old in Liverpool, you've got no money, so you have to improvise. And a lot of people would say that skiffle was the kind of punk music of its day. And I think that's probably
John
true.
Peel always used to say that it was the record that lit the blue touch paper. He said for him, for his whole life, and it's probably the same for you actually. That's what kickstarted. That was our English, the British Elvis, and it made a huge change his life.
But
there was a fantastic moment here in the studio when because I made a program for Radio 2 some years ago, well, 2007 actually, entitled The Day John Met Paul. It was a documentary about the time that they met in 1957. So we were celebrating the anniversary of that.
Yeah.
And I spoke at great length to Paul and everybody over Cynthia, all the people who were around, the surviving people that were witness to that moment. And that included the Quarrymen, because of course, Paul cycled down to that little church fete where they were playing. It was the first day that he met them. So I got the Quarrymen in here.
Oh, really?
Oh,
and, they played and we recorded everything, and they brought down with them their original 78 copy of Rock Island Line.
Oh, wow.
Because
amazing.
And you should have seen it, because obviously these old records, they had the hole in the middle. I mean, I've got a 45 here. This is Stand By Me, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's the hole in the middle where the single would drop on the spindle. The spindle is there to sort of hold it in place. And with Rock Island Line, of course, in those days, the only way that you could learn the lyrics of an American song, or a song that on the record was by playing that record over and over and jotting down the lyrics.
Yeah.
Which, to learn that song, is what the Quarrymen did. And they'd done it so often, so many times, that the very edge of the record was incredibly worn. But instead of being a round hole in the middle, this one was sort of rugby ball shaped.
Yes.
Because of the number of times they'd swung it back and forth to jot down.
So probably
the lyrics.
undulated up and down the sound, I should imagine,
Yeah.
I go, when I went to the record shop and people used to bring records back and say, oh, I've only played it once. You could always tell. Yeah, you could see round the hole were spindle marks where people had tried to put it on the thing in the middle of the plinth.
Yeah.
No, not even the selector. So you could see how many times the record had been played by just looking at the label. But I bet that, rugby ball shape is right. When I came to your place many years ago to write a piece for Word, I think, you told me rather sad story about you'd had some record, you'd had a garage flood, hadn't you, in your place?
Yeah.
God, it's a heartbreaking story which bears repetition here, Bob.
Oh, David. Well, the vinyl you see there represents now almost my entire vinyl album collection, because in 2006 here, we had the mother of all biblical 2-day storms. And it didn't just flood this part of the valley, it flooded the entire village. And it was the weekend at the time of Truck Festival. And literally the festival site was washed away. It was like there was a tsunami came down the hill and just went straight through all the tents and the marquees and the stages. God. It literally washed everything away in its wake. And we were under about 2.5 feet of water here, and it just went straight into the garage. Unfortunately,
so into this room you're in now.
No,
the garage. This is before this was built, right?
Yeah. This
is presumably up on stilts.
I'm up on stilts here.
Yeah,
yes,
brilliant.
There are 3 steps up into the studio.
Terrific.
But in those days, a lot of my vinyl was in boxes on the floor in the garage. I mean, you would never dream that. And the water just came in and wrecked them.
But now people might want to look away for a second, because Bob is now going to tell us which records were in there.
That's so sad.
It's not just any old records.
People should look away because Bob's about to cry.
Yeah.
Which is really... Well, I don't know whether you've ever seen a sodden old 33 and the third album in its sleeve that's been sitting in water for a few hours. Everything goes to paper mache, and everything begins to stick to the vinyl. I mean, within almost moments, the record is rendered completely useless. So I was picking up these squishy masses of it was just absolutely horrendous. So you can say that almost my entire collection, with the exception of the records that meant the most to me, which I'd had the foresight to keep in the house.
Right.
So in other words, Forever Changes by Love, the album that John Peel gave me, was safe. But so the ones that are there are they're the sole survivors.
Didn't you have Mark Bolan acetates and things like that?
Yeah. Oh, Tone, it was.
Oh,
it was,
no, that's just. I just
it
can't
was
bear to
catastrophic.
think about it.
I don't even. Yeah.
I think, sorry,
It's just too painful.
Bringing back.
Painful.
Well, doesn't it make us all feel very fortunate that we've still got most of our stuff? You know, I should treasure it even more. That's incredible.
So what have you been doing during lockdown? How have you been occupying yourself? You've continued to broadcast.
I've continued to broadcast, but also, of course, as I say, I'm here in the studio, and it's normally really, really busy. Almost day by day, we have sessions in here, and it's been quiet all of the last summer into autumn, winter. Now we've hardly had anybody cross this threshold other than myself and my son Miles, who actually probably will be arriving in about 10 minutes time, because we've got some recording to do later on. So you'll meet him, I hope.
Get him on, bring him on.
Yeah. But it began to occur to me that obviously we're not seeing musicians. Musicians aren't able to travel. They can't come to us. They can't go to gigs. The whole infrastructure of the music, grassroots music community is under threat here. So I'm an ambassador for the charity Help Musicians. It was formerly Help Musicians UK, which is its Twitter handle. And I was trying to think, if we could do some kind of fundraiser. And then I began to realize that my favorite ever single was coming up to its 60th anniversary.
This is your Stand By Me record.
This is Stand By Me.
Absolutely. Oh, it was brilliant, Bob. You had Peter Frampton and Mark Knopfler and all sorts of people.
Look,
Rick Wakeman.
Treasured. That's me and Benny King.
Oh, lovely.
Oh, wow.
That was taken at
that's great.
At the FBS. So we started reaching out to people to record a new version of Stand By Me. And it was amazing because just about everybody we reached out to said yes. And we were able to reach out to people in Nashville, people like Darius Rucker and Beth Nielsen Chapman and Jimmy Allen. We started, Mars sent them a basic. We recorded a basic backtrack, really just almost just the bass, with the click track, so that there was a timing that they could glue to. And then people began to send their versions back, and everybody sang it all the way through, which gave Miles a chance to mix in and out of all the different voices and layer them in the right way. And the eventual result was this. Look,
that's lovely.
And this is the single, which then I've literally this week got these 7-inch vinyl copies. But we put it out digitally. It very briefly made the top 40. I mean, but really for like a few hours.
Yeah.
But we felt that it was something important or symbolic that we wanted to do to draw attention to the plight of the grassroots community. And the other people that were doing this, funnily enough, was Matthew Bannister.
Right.
Because Matthew is head of a beautiful project called Folk on Foot.
Absolutely, it's really good.
It's lovely, isn't it? And so they put on a series of concerts to raise money for Help Musicians. So between us, we felt that we really were kind of mobilizing the troops.
Right.
So that took a lot of time during the winter to get this organized and get the single out. And I was so when we heard it, on the radio for the first time. I mean, you can. With all artists, you can understand how they feel and what an impact it has on them to hear their music on the radio. It's just, and so when we heard, it's the Whispering Bob All Stars. That's what we called it.
Yeah.
And I played the triangle at the beginning, and Mars and I were listening to it. We were almost in tears. Honestly, it's such a beautiful moment.
So, your original Benny King "Stand By Me," which you got there. Can you remember buying it?
I can. Absolutely.
Where did you buy it?
At a record shop called John Lever's in Gold Street in Northampton, where I used to live.
Right.
And the reason that I'd led to Stand By Me was because it must have been on the radio on Pick of the Pops with David Jacobs or something, but I heard this amazing record by the Drifters called There Goes My Baby.
Oh, yeah.
And I hadn't ever heard anything sounding quite like that before. That mix of soul and orchestra and Benny King's voice, it just got me completely in the heart. And so I became a huge fan of the Drifters. I bought everything of theirs, at that moment. Dance With Me, This Magic Moment.
Oh, yeah.
Save the Last Dance for Me.
Yeah.
I Count the Tears, I think, was the last one that Benny King did. And then he left and continued recording for Atlantic as a solo artist. So his first single was a double-sider, actually, a really good one too. First Taste of Love was on one side, and Spanish Harlem was on the other.
Right,
that's the really memorable one.
Yeah.
And I bought those, and so I knew that the next single was due. And I used to go down to the record shop to wait for the Decca delivery van to arrive.
Oh, that's keen.
Did it say Decca on the side?
Well, the guy would come in with these brown boxes full of London American singles and RCA singles.
Mugged on his way to the store. That's right.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
And so I knew the Benny King's record was coming out on the Friday, and the delivery van used to arrive last thing on Thursday evening. So I'd wait in the shop after school for it to arrive, and I'd buy records sight unseen, basically. So the new Duane Eddy or Johnny and the Hurricanes or Ventures or whatever it was, I'd just buy them on the spot without even having heard them. And so Benny King's Stand By Me arrived. And of course I bought it and I took it home. And I had a Dansette record player, and I put it on and put the needle down and was just absolutely, it was the realization of everything that Benny King had been doing to that point. It was, to me, it was perfect.
And the lyric is so beautiful, isn't it?
Oh,
if the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, it's absolutely, the mountains crumble to the sea. I mean, that's just unbelievable poetry.
I won't be afraid, as long as you stand by me. It's and there's
I'm going to ask a stupid question here. Who wrote it?
Oh, Benny King contributed. It was basically Lieber and Stoller.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Benny King told me when we were talking that it put his entire family through university in America. That's
really?
One song.
Just his bit of it.
Yeah. Because it then, obviously, it was the lead song on the film Stand By Me.
Yes.
And that gave it an entirely new lease of life. And it went to number one in 1987. So, yeah.
So the London American label, you collected all the London American label, which used to be really important, didn't it? Because it was the way that American R&B records arrived in Britain largely.
Yeah,
was on London American, wasn't it?
That's right. Well, London was the catch label, wasn't it, for a whole load of independent labels in the States. Well, not necessarily in independence. I mean, they put out the Atlantic label here. I mean, for example, one of my other really, really big favorite singles is Running Scared by Roy Orbison.
Oh, right, yes.
That came in London America.
That is. Now, that was released in the States on the Monument label.
Right, yes, of course.
And London licensed the Monument label and put out Roy Orbison. Same with Dal Shannon. He was on Big Top in the States.
Yeah.
So London, that group of labels, London, RCA, Coral, Brunswick, they had all the big American stars.
Yeah.
Buddy Holly was on Coral, Elvis was on RCA, and the design of these as well. Look, doesn't that look beautiful?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the original copy of Hound Dog and Blue Suede Shoes.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And this one, this is Jailhouse Rock.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So when it first appeared in Britain, it was a 45, was it? Not a 78.
They were 78s. I mean, but they're also, you could get them on 45.
All right, okay.
We hadn't quite tipped into 45 land yet.
Yeah.
Were the first records you bought 78s then?
They were.
Oh, well, can you remember the first record you ever bought?
Oh, yeah. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Because
because I can still remember my 3 elder sisters, our pocket money being spent on Guy Mitchell singing the blues and stuff. Oh, here we are, yeah.
There it is. That's Diana by Paul Anka.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
I'm so young and you're so old. Is that right? This, my darling, I've been told. So there weren't so many singles at that time about that tension between we're not allowed, our love is not allowed because you're
right.
You're 27 and I'm 6.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I remember that record. How funny.
Yeah. And I'm hoping to try and sort of make some sort of contact with Paul Anka. I've discovered he's on Instagram.
Right.
And he posted yesterday a photo of himself when he appeared on Juke Box Jury in 1959. And he said, does anybody remember? Please post if you remember seeing me.
He's done all sorts. Yeah, well, you remember.
Yeah.
He's done all sorts, Paul Anka. Really interesting person.
Yes, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, he discovered John Prine, Paul Anka. Little known fact.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes, he was. He was on. There's a long story involving Paul Anka gets on a plane to fly to Chicago, and he finds himself sitting near Chris Christopherson.
Right.
Chris Christopherson, who at the time is the big coming songwriter that everybody wants to cover. And he said, where are you going? I'm going to Chicago. Right, they go to Chicago. And so Christopherson says, I've got to go and see this guy who's supposed to be playing, support sets. And the two of them go to see John Prine, who's unknown at this stage. And it was Anka who kind of got him started. It's absolutely extraordinary. So Paul Anka was very young when he had that hit, wasn't he, with Diana?
He was only 14.
Well, there you go.
Incredible.
So, he's not of the generation you think he is,
Yeah.
So he's done all kinds of things, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Wrote all kinds. He did the lyrics for My Way, the English
Yes,
lyrics.
he did.
He did.
Yes, he did.
That's not a bad gig, is it?
That's incredible.
You don't have to do anything else, though,
Yes,
do you?
you
That's
don't
it.
have to do with it. Now, I'm going to ask you this, Bob, while it's front of mind, because Mark and I were talking about this the other day. You've lost that loving feeling, whenever we talk about 1964, 64, I think?
65.
65, There you go. I was trying to remember, there used to be a radio program on Radio Luxembourg done by Tony Hall. Tony Hall, who I think died last year, did he, or the year before? Do you remember this?
Was he That's it, and
that's all. Yours sincerely, Tony Hall. Absolutely. Yeah. It was the kind of friend of the Beatles and, all this. And he used to do a program, which I remember as being the program on Radio Luxembourg, where you first got to hear Atlantic Records.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure it was via that I heard Righteous Brothers, You've Lost That Loving Feeling,
Yeah.
And those were sponsored programs, weren't they?
They were.
Yeah. These are EMI, these are Decca, these are whatever, And that's how that stuff got on the radio, isn't it? In those days. Because you could only hear it in Luxembourg.
The funny thing was that when, say, I don't know, I might be being a little unkind to them, but let's say the Pi label had...
We're often unkind to the Pi label.
a half an hour show. It'd be the two hits that they had in the top 20 that week.
Yes.
And then loads and loads of other stuff that just sounded awful.
It just sounded terrible. Yeah.
So however successful the label was, that's how good their show was.
Yeah.
So again, the Decca label programs always sounded amazing because they always were filling the charts,
Stones and so forth. Yeah.
It's funny. I remember Juke Box Jury so vividly as being one of the few ways you could hear new records. Do you remember that program with Pete Murray, David Jacobs, wasn't it? Penny Valentine,
yes,
Alma Colgan, and people like that. It seemed so thrilling, and that wonderful little twist that they had, whereby occasionally the person they were talking about would appear from behind a curtain. After their record had been,
they did that every program.
Every program, that's right. I think they did. Yeah, it was a brilliant little mechanic. Oh, it's such a great program. It's fantastic.
I've got a wonderful David Jacobs story, which I may even have told you before, because the first mention I ever had on the radio was at my 15th birthday. My mum had written to David Jacobs to ask him to do a dedication for me.
Yeah.
And so we were listening. This is on the old Light program, of course. Yeah. So we're listening. David had a lunchtime show, and he did a dedication for me to Robert Harris.
Very
Your mother has written to me and asked me to play a piece of music. It was something like Mantovani or something, but it was thrilling, absolutely thrilling. And my mum wrote to him to say, thank you very much for playing Rob's record, because she always used to call me Rob. And amazingly, he wrote back, thank you very much, Mrs. Harris, for all the kind words about the music, because she loved Mantovani and he used to play Mantovani loads. So there began a correspondence between the two of them that lasted through the years.
No.
I mean, I'm not kidding. When my mum passed away, there was in a drawer, there was a pile of letters this big, with
lovely,
a string round them, a bow, that were letters from David through the years to my mum. Very formal, very lovely. Dear Mrs. Harris, so kind of you to write, that sort of letter.
I think everybody's mum rather adored David Jacobs. He was a charmer, wasn't he? My goodness me.
Yes,
is it fair to say he was probably conducting similarly formal correspondences with ladies all over the country?
This is probably true.
Who all felt he was they were the
his time. Certainly.
What a gentleman! What a professional!
I know.
But the thing was that when I started work at Radio 1, Whistle Test, through all of this period of time, David didn't know, if you like, that I was my mother's son.
Yeah.
So when I started on Radio 2, the first show I did on Radio 2 was in Broadcasting House. And David was broadcasting live just down the corridor. I was in 1J and he was in 1F, I think it was, the studios then. And I thought, I can't go on air following David without at least telling him that. So I went down the corridor and I went in to the control room, and I said to his producer, would it be possible for me to put my head round the door? And he said, he doesn't really like having visitors. So I said, it is something very important. So I waited for the next record to start, and I went in and I said, David, I'm Bob Harris. You know the Doria Harris that you've been corresponding with all these years? And he said, yes. And I said, well, it's my mum, And he was, his eyes widened, and then his whole face lit up. And so then every time I saw him around Wogan House or Broadcasting House, then from then on, literally the first thing he would say to me, hello, Bob, and how's your mother?
How gorgeous.
So when it was my This Is Your Life in 2003, it was because I knew nothing about the organization of any of this. But it comes to the end of the program, and so Michael Aspel is standing there with the red book, and he said, but we have one more surprise guest, and behind the curtain or whatever, I hear this voice going, and what a pleasure it was to play you music on my program when you were 15 years old. And then David, ladies and gentlemen, David Jacobs, and how out he comes, with all the music and everything going. And the music dies down, and in a split second of silence between the end of the music and Michael Aspel picking up and saying the next thing, in the background, you heard my mother go, oh, David, I'm your biggest fan.
Oh, that's absolutely perfect.
And
that's adorable.
That was the first time they'd met over
They'd
all
never
these
met.
years.
They never met.
So you've been on This Is Your Life. Have you got the book?
I have.
Have you got it there?
I haven't got it in the studio.
What a shame. I'd love to see a This Is Your Life book. What's it like inside?
It's a big red photo album, basically.
Right. Okay.
I tell you what was the very best thing about This Is Your Life was the after party.
Right.
Oh my God, did they know how to throw a party?
Oh, really?
I'm sure. And also that combination of people, many of whom had never met, it must have been absolutely wonderful.
It was amazing. And to see my mum and David Jacobs, with my dad as well, sitting over there at a table, chatting away and getting so animated. And it was fabulous. I mean, the party went on to about 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, very good.
It was just a sensational experience all round.
Yeah, no, you're about to go back on the road when lockdown, when this bloody war is over, with your much postponed jaunt with Mr. D. Baker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. D. Baker, who yesterday sent me a clip of, and he probably sent it to you as well, of Robert Fripp issuing a birthday greeting to somebody. Have you seen these things?
Gosh, yes. Somebody said to me the other day, have they said to you two, would you like to do anything?
Well, surely you would be the person to ask, Bob.
Yeah.
Have you never been asked to record in your distinctive tones a kind of birthday dedication to somebody?
Many times. In fact, funnily enough, one of the reasons that Mars is coming over this morning is that we're doing some filming, and part of that is that I've been asked to do, I'm not going to reveal it, but it's the 70th birthday, a big rock star 70th birthday coming
lovely.
up. So I'm going to film a little message to send.
But these are also, this is just a Robert Fripp fan whose wife has paid, presumably quite handsomely, for Robert Fripp to record nice to see you on your birthday, Nick, or whatever he is. And I understand you went to these gigs and your wife's asked for this. And I thought, surely Bob's been asked to do this.
Just funnily enough, a couple of days ago, I got a note to say, would I be interested in doing this? And of course, yes, I am. It's funny though. I've just opened a store on my website, and I've learned over the years that I'm a slow seller. You hope that things burst into life. In my case, that's not always the case. It's different. Me and Danny as a combination going out on the road. We are selling tickets, and if I do my Bob Harris Presents, they do quite well.
Right.
But all other attempts to behave in a commercial way.
Dave and I are just putting a toe into this strange water here with some merchandise. We've just shown our Word in Your Attic hoodies and t-shirts.
Yes.
It's going all right, actually, but it's a weird way that you can calibrate your appeal, can't you?
I know. Well, we've got Stand By Me merch, loads of it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's done quite well. But anything me for some, so I've just sort of accepted the fact that commercial thrust. In fact, again, Mars and I are going to be talking today about the way to market my store on my site, because it started off when we first launched it. It went brilliantly well, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And then it's just sort of stopped. And you don't want to be over. I don't want to keep posting about it on Twitter and all of that, because it does eventually begin to look a bit desperate.
Yeah. Dave, we're very fascinated by this, because we've been talking to all sorts of people and lots of musicians. But Billy Bragg's been selling off old posters, hasn't he, Dave? Stuff and old bits of art, merchandise. And Lloyd Cole was really interesting. Lloyd Cole, if you write to Lloyd Cole, I think you send him $50 or something like that. He will hand write a version of your favorite lyric, your favorite song, which you can then frame and put in your wall, which is a lovely idea. I can't believe people haven't thought of this before, actually. It's a great idea.
This is one of the things that's come out of lockdown, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The sort of creativity and resourcefulness of musicians and people in the industry that can't make a living at the moment going out on the road. So, what else can we do to bring revenue in?
Completely.
And so, yeah.
So are you, when are you hoping your jaunt with Danny will start? When's it?
June, we hope.
June, you hope, right?
The first date is in the book on June the 7th. I think that's a bit optimistic. Right. But by the end of June, and certainly into July and August, hopefully, and anything we can't do at the front end, we'll tag on to the other end. And the idea is that once the tour starts rolling, it'll just continue on a sort of occasional gig basis, just ongoing.
Have you rehearsed it or anything like this, or
what's the structure of it?
What's the structure?
So the idea is, obviously, it's a vehicle for the two of you to tell us as many top end rock and roll anecdotes as possible. But how do you frame that?
The first one, okay. So I got an email early in 2019 from the Beauty Festival.
Yeah.
This was about February or March, saying, we've had this idea. We'd like to put you together with Danny Baker to do an evening together. Would you be up for it? So I actually got in touch with Danny and I said, what do you think? He said, well, let's do it. So I went back and said yes. And then that summer, that late spring and summer, I had my dissection, my aortic dissection, which knocked me out for like 4 months. And by the time I'd sort of begun to regather my thoughts and everything and wonder whether I was even going to be able to go back to work, all thoughts of doing this gig with Danny had gone way. I'd just completely forgotten all about it. And then I saw on Twitter that Danny had posted saying, Bob and I are going to be at the Beauty Festival in October. Come on down, folks, and everything else. And then both he and I got an email from the Beauty Festival to say, please don't promote. It's all sold out. In fact, we could have sold it 2 or 3 times over. So, oh, great. Okay. So Danny and I met up. I mean, I'm absolutely not kidding. At the side of the stage.
This is so Danny Baker, isn't it?
Just before we went on.
Seat of pants is the main vehicle here.
And neither of us were frightened by this at all. Because I've done Bob Harris Presents nights for years, and I know that even if I've got nothing in my head at that moment, as I walk out on stage,
it suddenly comes to you.
Something will arise.
Jimmy Carter at the Capricorn Records picnic. Excellent. Yeah. Lovely.
So he said, don't worry. He said, I'll get them laughing and we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
And so we sat down. Danny said something really brilliant. I can't remember what it was. Everybody was laughing. I instantly felt relaxed. And we started chatting, and that was it. Off we went.
It's just it's his sheer energy.
Yeah,
is an absolute force in itself. It gets through so many problems.
So we didn't know, but Robert Plant was in the.
I remember you tweeting a picture of the 3 of you. That's right. He was in the audience, and you were telling stories about Led Zeppelin too. I think
we were.
Yeah,
and so he came round to see us afterwards and said, that's one of the best gigs I've been to in years. He said, you should take it on the road. This is Robert, you should take it on the road.
Yeah.
So Danny and I looked at, actually, that'd be a really good idea. So that's literally how it came about. And Robert said, when you do take it on the road, I can just pop in every now and again to one or other of the gigs, And then Danny and I were thinking, right, well, if Robert, maybe we'd get 1 or 2 other surprise guests.
Oh, right. You could do that locally, couldn't you? Different.
So in other words, we're in the middle of a story about, I don't know, Led Zeppelin at the Continental Hyatt House in Los Angeles or something.
Yeah.
And, I'm saying to Danny, or Danny says to me, surely that can't be true. And hang on a second, there's somebody here who can confirm it one way or the other. And out comes Robert. He said, that's what I'd love to do. So that's what we were going to do. This is going to be all through last summer. And of course, it didn't happen because of COVID. So we're picking up the threads again 12 months on.
Such a good idea. Brilliant idea.
There's a lot to be said for not preparing at all, actually.
There really is.
But it also means you can put on a different show every night, can't you?
Yeah,
you could just go off on a tangent,
Yeah.
The worst thing with anything like this that I've found, and Mark and I've found, is sitting around for 2 hours before it starts, getting keyed up, and your energy level kind of dips and so forth. Whereas very often if you get straight out of the car onto the stage, you're absolutely fine because you don't have that time for that to happen to you.
All you need is just a positive reaction from the audience and you're away. Because if you fill that gap beforehand with all sorts of self-doubt,
I know.
Is that really interesting? I don't know. Just me and a member of Wishbone Ash. I mean, is everybody going to like that? I don't know. And then you find out it's all right,
Well, I remember the very first Bob Harris Presents I did in 2007. I went out on a little tour, and my son Miles, who, it's funny because Miles, all my 3 here, Miles, Dylan, and Flo, have all come into the music industry, and Miles he's the most brilliant producer and sound mixer now. His skill set is just unbelievable, and I began to realize, wasn't he? Yeah, he's done everything, Mark. I mean, he's posting his photography stuff now. He's got a company called Whole Hog Media, And anyway, so he said, "Can I come with you to this gig?" And I said, "Yeah." It was in Pontardawe, which is where my dad was where he grew up. The art centre there. I thought it would be a fabulous place to start. And there's a local band called The Stories that I loved. And so anyway, we're driving down the M4, and Miles was saying to me, "So what are you going to talk about this evening?" And I said, "I don't know. It'll come, you know, I know it'll be all right. I'm thinking about it now." So we get there and we settle in the dressing room, and it's about 3/4 of an hour before I'm due to go on stage. And he said, "Surely now, so tell me how it's all going to start." And I said, "Honestly, Miles, I don't know." So we get to the side of the stage and I'm being introduced. And Miles looks at me, he said, "You do know what you're going to say now, don't you?"
Any idea yet?
No, actually, no, I don't. And I walked out on stage. It was the best thing that could possibly happen, because, you know, here I am at the Arts Centre in Pontardawe, and I just said, it's so great to be here. You know, I spent a lot of my childhood here. And as I'm pulling the mic up and sitting down, all these memories start flooding back. And that's what I begin to talk about. And it was so spontaneous, and it really, really worked.
That's lovely.
But I will just say, though, that I don't know whether you two have been in this situation. I did 8 gigs on that little mini tour, and they were good, you know, and tickets sold very well, except I think it was Worcester. And Miles was with me, and a guy from the blues band, Gary Fletcher, was the musician, guest musician for the night. And it was in a converted chapel, quite small, but it had a very austere atmosphere to it, and the backstage wasn't very friendly. And so we're sitting there, and you can hear, can't you? You can tell when you can hear an audience coming in, can't you? And actually, Mars is just arriving. This is great. So, hey, Mars, come in. I'm on a Zoom with no, we're waiting to see you anyway. With David Hepworth and Mark Allen.
Oh, come and say hello.
Yeah, come and say hello.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, Miles. Nice to see you. Mars gone.
You've got to stand by me, Mars.
Oh, yeah. Very
it's
good.
part of our merch. Yeah.
Very good. Clever product placement there.
Yeah, repping the brand. Yeah,
that's good.
The brand. So we're sitting backstage, and it's about 10 minutes before we're due to go on. There is absolutely no sound of any audience of any description whatsoever. So I creep round and just move the curtain like this so I can see through. And I look around and I'm going, 1, 2, 3. You know, there are about 7 people there. And I walked out, and what do? You know, I said to everybody, because they
would you please come close?
Yeah.
Come in.
This is cozy. Yeah.
And I did an acoustic set.
Yeah, there you go.
Without any mic, and just sat and chatted to the audience, and it was lovely, actually. But
you got to make
one of my most
of
unnerving experiences doing a little literary show and being stuck in a room round the side of the stage where you couldn't go out before you went on stage, because otherwise it would blow the kind of entrance on stage. So you could hear the conversations of everybody arriving. I can remember hearing this girl saying to her husband, boyfriend, or whatever, she said, "I can't believe I've come to this. I've never heard of this guy, and it's going to be totally and utterly boring." And I just thought, oh no! I felt like opening the window and saying, "Look, just give it 5 minutes. It'll be okay. Don't worry." You just sit there on your own, thinking, "I've got to keep the spirits up somehow." You know.
Yeah.
As you see, you go out there and you could hunt buffalo in the empty spaces.
I was talking about the Pontardawe gig. You know, the first one on the one you came to. Yeah. And saying that I had no idea what I was going to talk about before we got there.
Well, that's the way it goes.
That's the way it goes.
The thing to do is, if you've only got 7 people, is draw them to the front and say,
exactly.
You're very fortunate, because now that there's a very select audience, I can tell you things I wouldn't tell a bigger audience.
As long as you keep it to yourself.
People feel they got
Robert Plant. Well, I tell you what, one night. Yeah.
So,
that's
Bob,
good.
It's traditional on these chats that we climax by you telling us what is the greatest record ever made. And nobody knows better than you, Bob Harris. So come on, what is it?
Well, it is the aforementioned Stand By Me.
There you go.
Oh, good. Very good.
For all the reasons we did mention. It's got everything, this record. You know, Benny King interpretation of this song is so empathetic. The lyrics are so kind and caring and supportive. You know, the open production and then the strings. To me, it's like the middle section is like listening to a piece of classical music. It's just, it's magnificent and beautiful in every way. So Stand By Me is my favorite ever record. I think it's monumental.
What a choice.
Well, we wouldn't argue with you at all. I don't think anybody would. Bob, it's been so nice to start the day talking to you.
I love seeing you both. I mean, I must say how lovely your friendship, you two. How long has it been?
We hate each other.
We hate, deep down, we hate each other. It's all an act. No, we met. I tell you what, we had our anniversary. And I remember we met in 1979 on the set at a university. Was it university, wasn't it? In Salford University. And it was an Earthquake gig. Earthquake had a hit record. We're on the Berserkly label, and Dave was the plugger, and I was recovering it for Record Mirror. And that's when we met. So that's quite a while ago, isn't it? Is that 46 years?
I tell you what, we share one anecdote, and Bob will understand this. When Jill Sinclair started doing those whistle test DVDs of the, old clips, which nobody had seen for years at that stage, and all the former presenters of Whistle Test were approached to be interviewed, talk about their memories, and you were interviewed, and Annie was interviewed, and Andy was interviewed, and so forth. And Mark and I, we said, well, let's do it together. Where should we do it? Oh, we'd do it at your place.
So we did it at my place. We did it in my front room on the sofa. At one point, it's all very cozy and domestic. At one point, our cat kind of wandered across the back. We stroked the cat, without realizing for a split second that there was going to be a percentage of people watching who thought, well, I always thought so. Maybe it happened to Mark. Obviously live together.
That's the visual language of television.
I know, it's like Morecambe and Wise.
You see all the other ones. See Bob, there's Bob on his own. There's Annie on her own, Richard Williams or whatever. And then these two guys,
And to the extent that they still get us completely confused. I'm stopped in the street all the time and said, are you David Ellen or are you David Hepworth or whatever, and loved your books and this, that, and the other. And he gets the same. So very peculiar.
Nobody makes that mistake with you, Bob.
Only one Bob Harris.
Yeah, there's only one Bob Harris. It's been delightful to talk to you.
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All the very best.
All right, have a good day.
The band is back together.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is. Fantastic to see you, Bob.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.